The Republican National Convention Hall in Houston was bathed in bright white lights, every corner draped with red, white, and blue banners. The air hummed with tension, the kind of tension that makes silence louder than applause. Reporters leaned forward, cameras zoomed in, and thousands of party loyalists filled the arena, each waiting for a showdown that had been whispered about for months. At center stage, two men prepared to face off, not Democrats against Republicans, but Republicans against themselves. On one side sat Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, his wheelchair positioned firmly behind a polished oak podium. His face carried the quiet grit of a man who had spent years fighting Washington over border security, states' rights, and the soul of his state. To his supporters, Abbott was a warrior for the people, a man who refused to bend. Opposite him stood former Vice President Mike Pence, polished in his Navy suit, his posture radiating calm resolve. His voice was known for its careful cadence, his politics shaped by decades of public service and deep ties to the evangelical base. Pence embodied tradition, faith, and institutional respect, a stark contrast to Abbott's fiery populist energy. The moderator's voice cut through the silence. Tonight, the Republican Party looks inward. Governor Abbott. Vice President Pence. This is not about Democrats or liberals. This is about you, the vision you offer for the GOP's future. The question is simple: whose soul will guide the Republican Party into the next generation? The audience shifted in their seats, leaning forward as the cameras panned from Abbott's calm steel gaze to Pence's prayerful intensity. It wasn't just a debate. It was a battle for identity, a collision of philosophies. Abbott's Texas grit versus Pence's traditional faith. The room felt like a tinderbox waiting for a spark. And when Abbott leaned forward, his hand resting lightly on the podium, the spark was about to ignite. The moderator's voice rang out, crisp and firm. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, the question before us tonight is this: what should the Republican Party stand for in the next decade? Governor Abbott, you have the floor. Abbott straightened, his tone calm but edged with steel. The GOP must stand for the people who built this country. Families who are tired of open borders, tired of fentanyl pouring into their communities, tired of Washington telling them what to value. Strength begins at home. If we can't protect Texans, if we can't protect Americans, then all the speeches in Washington mean nothing. The soul of this party is not in D.C., it's in the dirt of Texas, the heartland, in every parent trying to raise their kids free from fear. The Texas crowd thundered, boots stomping in rhythm with chants of Abbott. Abbott. The moderator turned. Vice President Pence, your response. Pence's voice came smooth, measured, carrying the cadence of a sermon. The Republican Party must remember its foundation: faith, family, and freedom. Governor Abbott speaks of strength at home, and I agree, but leadership is also about integrity, about moral courage. We cannot simply wall ourselves in. We must lead with principles rooted in God's truth, and show America is not just strong, but righteous. The GOP's soul must reflect both conviction and compassion. His supporters rose in applause, many clasping hands in prayer, their voices ringing out, Pence. Pence. The contrast was stark, Abbott's populist fire against Pence's moral authority. The room vibrated with divided energy, every word drawing a line deeper between two visions of the same party. The moderator leaned in, sensing the growing storm. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, it seems the battle for the GOP's soul has just begun. The moderator adjusted his papers, glancing between the two men. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, your visions could not be more different. Governor, you speak of securing the border and protecting families. Vice President, you stress moral authority and America's global role. But what happens when those collide? Abbott leaned in, his eyes sharp. It's already colliding. Washington talks about values, but values mean nothing if our communities are unsafe. I've sat with parents who lost children to fentanyl. I've seen ranchers cry because their land was overrun. These aren't headlines, they're lives. The GOP must choose, speeches in D.C. or action in Texas. I choose action. The Texas crowd roared, flags waving as chants of Abbott. Abbott shook the rafters. Pence, unshaken, raised his hand for calm. His voice rang steady, almost pastoral. Governor, I do not diminish those struggles. But a party built only on anger loses its way. America must be a beacon. Faith, decency, and respect, those are what define us. If we sacrifice our moral compass for short-term battles, we lose not just elections, but our soul. Applause thundered from his supporters, many nodding with reverence. The contrast couldn't be clearer, Abbott's raw populism against Pence's dignified faith. The moderator leaned closer, sensing the escalation. Gentlemen, tonight you're not just debating each other, you're dividing this room. The question is simple, whose vision will unite America? Abbott and Pence locked eyes, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The audience, split down the middle, leaned forward in silence, waiting for the next blow. The moderator's voice carried above the restless hum of the audience. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, you've both laid out powerful arguments. But the people want clarity. Is the Republican Party's soul about protecting our communities, or about holding fast to faith and moral leadership? Abbott leaned forward, his voice firm, measured, but burning with intensity. Faith is important, yes. But Texans can't pray away the cartels. They can't quote scripture to stop fentanyl from killing their children. Washington loves to give sermons while Texans dig graves. The GOP must be a party of action, protecting Americans first, not lecturing them from ivory towers. The crowd exploded, boots stomping, voices chanting his name, Abbott. Abbott. Pence did not flinch. He raised his hand, his voice calm and solemn, as if addressing a church congregation. Governor Abbott, the cartels are evil, no doubt. But the answer isn't anger, it's righteousness. A party that abandons faith, that trades moral conviction for raw populism, will win battles but lose its soul. We are called to something higher. America's strength is not just in walls, it's in values, in being a light for the world. His words drew a standing ovation from his side of the hall, supporters clasping hands, some whispering, Amen. Abbott's jaw tightened. His reply was swift, cutting through the applause. Vice President, with all respect, light doesn't mean much if the people are left in darkness. And right now, Washington's sermons leave families defenseless. The soul of this party must be about protecting those families, not preaching while they suffer. Gasps swept through the hall. Abbott's line had landed like a hammer, sharp and unforgettable. Pence's face hardened, his eyes narrowing, as the crowd once again split into dueling chants, Abbott. Abbott, and Pence. Pence. The divide was now undeniable. This was no longer a debate, it was a reckoning for the Republican Party's future. The moderator's voice struggled to steady the room. Gentlemen, the audience is divided. Let's move beyond principles. How do you act on these visions? What would you do tomorrow if given the reins of the party? Abbott leaned in first, his tone sharp and direct. Tomorrow, I'd secure America's border. I'd stop the flood of drugs, crime, and chaos into our neighborhoods. We've lost too many lives because Washington talks while Texans fight. The GOP's soul must be rooted in defending its people, not in chasing applause from elite circles. Texans demand action, and I'll give it to them. The crowd erupted, flags waving, boots pounding the floor. Abbott. Abbott, thundered across the hall. Pence raised his chin, waiting for silence. When he spoke, his words carried the cadence of a sermon. Tomorrow, I'd restore integrity to our politics. I'd call this party back to its foundation, faith, family, and freedom. Without righteousness, strength becomes tyranny. Without moral clarity, walls become prisons. The GOP cannot simply be a party of force. It must be a party of principle. Applause broke like a wave from his supporters, many raising their hands in reverence. Abbott's voice cut back like a blade. Principles without protection are empty. Ask the families who buried loved ones because Washington failed. They don't need more sermons, Vice President. They need leaders who fight for them. Pence's reply came slow, deliberate. And ask the families who prayed for leaders with courage to uphold truth. If this party trades faith for fury, we will win battles but lose America's very soul. The room roared again, split in half, chants colliding, Abbott, Abbott, and Pence. Pence. The moderator's voice trembled. This is no longer just a debate. This is the Republican Party, tearing at its own seams. The moderator leaned in, his face tense. Gentlemen, tonight isn't just a debate, it's a test. If this party cannot unify, it risks tearing itself apart. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, how do you answer to those who fear the GOP's future? Abbott didn't hesitate. His voice rose with conviction, cutting through the restless hall. The GOP's future doesn't belong to politicians in Washington. It belongs to the people. To the farmer in West Texas, the truck driver in Ohio, the single mom in Florida. They don't care about lectures, they care about security. They care about whether their kids come home safe at night. That's the soul of this party. And if the GOP forgets that, it doesn't deserve to survive. His side of the arena erupted, chants of Abbott, Abbott, drowning out the moderator's attempts for order. Pence stood still, his expression calm but resolute, waiting for the noise to fade. Then, with a voice carrying the gravity of a sermon, he spoke. The future of the GOP, and of America, depends on something higher than fear or fury. It depends on faith. It depends on men and women who still believe this nation is guided by God's hand. If we abandon our moral compass for short-term applause, we will not only lose elections, we will lose the very character of America. I will not allow that. His words lit up his supporters, many standing, raising hands as if in worship. Cries of Pence, Pence echoed like a church choir. The moderator tried again, but the hall was a storm, two sides of the party colliding in real time. Abbott's people, stomping and roaring for protection and strength. Pence's people, standing tall for faith and principle. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the fire in Abbott's eyes and the solemn resolve in Pence's. This was no longer about who could win the debate. It was about which vision would carry the heart of the Republican Party into the future. The moderator's voice strained against the storm of chants. Gentlemen, one question remains: how do you lead a party that is this divided? Tonight we see the fracture. How do you unite? Abbott's hand pressed firmly on the podium, his voice rising above the chaos like a battle cry. You don't unite a party by watering down convictions. You don't heal America by asking people to sacrifice their safety for someone else's approval. The GOP doesn't need another sermon, it needs fighters. Fighters who put America's families first. If that divides the room, so be it. Because history doesn't remember those who stood in the middle, it remembers those who stood their ground. His words lit up his side of the hall like a lightning strike, the chants of Abbott, 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 rolling like thunder. Pence waited, calm as ever, his hands folded in front of him. When he spoke, it was with the weight of a pastor delivering his final message. Governor Abbott, your fire is powerful. But fire without faith consumes everything. The GOP cannot be built on anger. It must be built on enduring truth. We can protect our families and still honor God. We can secure our nation and still hold fast to principles. Unity will not come through fear, it will come through faith. And that faith is what binds America together, not just in Texas, but across this land. His supporters erupted, some chanting, Pence, Pence, others simply raising their hands as though in prayer. The moderator, his voice cracking, tried to close. Tonight, America has witnessed the collision of two Republican futures, one defined by grit and borderlines, the other by faith and conviction. And the question remains, whose soul will define the GOP? The camera zoomed in, freezing the image of Abbott's unflinching glare and Pence's calm, prayerful composure. Two men, one stage, and a party teetering on the edge of transformation. The moderator steadied his voice, desperate to regain control. Final question before closing remarks. Governor Abbott, Vice President Pence, if history remembers this moment, what do you want it to say about you? Abbott's eyes narrowed, his voice ringing like steel on steel. I want history to say Greg Abbott fought for the people when no one else would. That he stood against Washington's failures, against open borders, against weak leadership. That he chose action over empty words. If the soul of the GOP means anything, it means standing with families before politics. And that's what I will always do. The arena shook with chants of Abbott. Abbott. His supporters stomping their boots like thunder. Pence, calm and deliberate, let the roar subside before speaking. His voice carried the solemn rhythm of a prayer. I want history to say Mike Pence stood firm in faith. That in an age of anger, he held the line on truth. That he reminded America the GOP is not just about borders and battles, it is about values that outlast any crisis. The soul of this party must reflect God's grace, or it will lose itself no matter how many walls it builds. His supporters rose, some with hands clasped, others chanting, Pence. Pence, as if in worship. The camera panned the crowd, divided yet united in intensity, two halves of the Republican Party screaming for two very different futures. The moderator exhaled slowly, realizing the stage was now beyond control. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight you have witnessed not just a debate, but a declaration, a fight for the soul of the GOP. And the question will echo far beyond this hall, will it be Abbott's fire, or Pence's faith, that defines the future? The audience erupted one last time, the clash of voices filling the night air, a sound that symbolized a party split to its core. The moderator's voice quivered as the crowd roared in two directions. Gentlemen, before we close, answer me this, if the party must choose one vision, why should it be yours? Abbott's hands gripped the podium. His voice cut like a blade, sharp and unyielding. Because my vision defends the people. Not just words, not just sermons, action. When cartels threaten our borders, I send troops. When Washington fails, I step up. If the GOP is to survive, it must fight for Americans who feel forgotten. My vision is rooted in their reality, not in lofty speeches. Choose me, and the GOP will never forget who it serves. His supporters roared, stomping their boots, chants of Abbott. Abbott, shaking the walls. Pence lifted his gaze heavenward for a moment before speaking, his voice steady as stone. Because without faith, action is empty. Without principle, strength is dangerous. Governor Abbott may protect borders, but I will protect America's soul. I offer a vision where the GOP leads not just with might, but with morality. Where our party stands as a light, not a wall. If Republicans abandon truth, no victory will matter. Choose me, and the GOP will remember why it exists. The other half of the crowd erupted, voices rising in a chorus of Pence. Pence, echoing through the hall like a hymn. The moderator leaned forward, visibly shaken by the intensity. Tonight, America has seen two futures, Abbott's fire and Pence's faith. And the truth is clear, the Republican Party cannot walk both paths. It must choose. The camera panned the arena, two halves of the GOP screaming for two men, two visions, two souls. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the weight of history. The moderator's voice trembled as he spoke into the mic. Governor Abbott. Vice President Pence. One final statement before we close this night, speak not only to this crowd, but to every American watching at home. Why should the GOP's soul belong to you? Abbott leaned forward, his voice steady but fierce, every word landing like a strike. Because America is in a fight for survival. Our borders are under siege, our families are in danger, and Washington has failed us. I don't speak from ivory towers, I act. I protect Texans, and I will protect Americans. If the GOP wants to endure, it must choose leaders who don't just talk about values but defend them on the ground. The soul of this party is with the people, and I will never abandon them. His supporters erupted into thunderous chants, Abbott. Abbott, their voices echoing like the heartbeat of Texas itself. Pence, composed and solemn, placed both hands on the podium. His tone was quieter, but carried the gravity of Scripture. Because a nation without faith cannot stand. Walls can be built, armies can march, but without moral truth, America loses its way. I do not offer anger, I offer conviction. I do not promise only security, I promise righteousness. The GOP's soul must not be consumed by fear, but guided by faith. And I will ensure that light never fades. His side of the arena stood, cheering, shouting, Pence. Pence, with voices rising like a hymn. The moderator's voice cracked as he raised his hand. Tonight, America has witnessed fire and faith. Abbott's resolve. Pence's conviction. 2 men. 1 party. 1 soul at stake. The cameras zoomed in, the glare in Abbott's eyes, the prayerful calm in Pence's. 2 faces, 2 futures, 1 stage. The roar of the crowd shook the rafters, half crying out for fire, half for faith. The Republican Party was split in 2, and the battle for its soul had only just begun. Tonight, you've witnessed more than a debate, you've seen the soul of the Republican Party placed on trial. Governor Abbott stood with fire, promising action, strength, and protection for families who feel forgotten. Vice President Pence stood with faith, reminding us that without moral truth, power alone cannot save a nation. 2 visions. 2 futures. 1 party. The Republican Party now stands at a crossroads. Will it choose fire or faith? Grit or grace? The answer will not only shape the GOP's destiny, but the destiny of America itself. One thing is certain, the fight for the soul of this party has only just begun.